Prime Minister Narendra Modi has signalled that there will be mega, big bang structural reform on the issue of land acquisition, labour laws and even administrative processes. But in the midst of a pandemic, will this have the kind of impact that it ordinarily have, which is to boost investment demand? Will more companies want to create projects in India? Joining us for this Mega India Today virtual brainstorm, we've got Venu Srinivasan, chairperson of the TVS Group, TV Narendran, Chief Executive Officer of Tata Steel, Shrikant Somani, chairperson of Ceramics Limited. We've got Jay Panda, Vice President, National Spokesperson of the BJP, General CII, Sanjay Kapoor, chairperson of Sona Comstar. And I want to start by asking Venu Srinivasan about the signalling on long-term reform. Now, opinion divided. One, of course, we've been waiting for this reform for a long time. But if it happens now, will it lead to an uptick in investment in India? Will it change the morale? Will it change the conditions? Will it give industry something to cheer and look forward to?
Well, reforms took place 30 years ago under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. And since then, actually, economy has grown very well and people have forgotten about further reform. In fact, we went back a big step when we did the land acquisition bill, where we increased the land price for acquisition by 6 times in rural areas, twice in urban areas, making any new major infrastructure project unviable. Now, this was done on the basis that the transfer price or registration price was much lower than what was actually paid because of black money. Now that with demonetization, black money has gone, the land prices are almost equal to registered value. We need to bring back a parity, maybe for rural land twice, but urban land, even if you get registration value when you sell it, you're lucky. So registration value should be the basis. I think that land reform is crying out. The second land reform is title deed. In India, you cannot verify title deeds. So these two things are necessary. When it comes to labor reform, we have to do it with the human face. Today, on paper, the retrenchment compensation is abysmal. All of us, when we offer voluntary retirement compensation, is much higher. So why don't we increase the retrenchment compensation to a fair level, but allow flexibility? Then we will also be quite responsible. We're not going to spend lakhs per employee asking him to go and then go back and hire employees. So you'll be careful to take people and careful to let people go. And finally, Factories Act and the standing model orders. The model standing orders are a travesty which prevent people from hiring. Now, if you do all this, we need to come to the top 5 in competitiveness compared to China, Vietnam, Indonesia and Thailand. Only then can we attract a large number of people who are leaving China, either because Chinese labor has become very expensive and not competitive, or for geopolitical reasons.
Mr. Narendran, what's the government's credibility in your eyes on the issue of substantive structural reform? The last time the Prime Minister pushed through on land acquisition, he came under immense political fire, under duress from within and without. He had to take back or dilute substantially what he was hoping to push through on land acquisition. Do you think this crisis provides an opportunity? Because in India, typically, big reform is only pushed through when there is a big crisis like there was in 1991.
Yeah, I think this crisis is certainly an opportunity, and the Prime Minister mentioned that himself yesterday. To be fair to the government, I think the GST reform, IBC, these have been big-ticket reforms which have happened, and I'm glad it has happened. But I think this is a great opportunity. We've been talking about Make in India for some time. I think it's a great opportunity for us to do these reforms and get investments into India. I've been specifically saying it's a great opportunity for the states in the eastern part of the country to also look at this as an opportunity to attract investment, because a lot of migrant workers are back in the eastern states, and there's an opportunity to do reforms and attract investments and create jobs in these states. So there probably is going to be a recalibration of the workforce. There's going to be more technology adoption in the west and south and north, where labor is going to be expensive. And in the east, I think there are opportunities to invest and create more jobs. And overall, I think for the country, we can leverage the fact that we are rich in many inputs, and we are potentially a very large market. So
no, but Shrikant Somani, the challenge is this. Industry already says we have excess capacity which is not being fully utilized, and therefore even if these changes are made on land, making it easier to acquire more land? Will it lead to a spur in investment? Will domestic industry have the appetite, the desire to go out and start new projects at a time when they're already struggling for survival?
I think it's a futuristic view, and the Prime Minister has rightly said that we have to make India future ready, and therefore these land reforms, etc., will come in very handy for investments to flow in. So therefore we can't make a judgment on today and tomorrow. I think it's basically after the COVID situation what happens, and I think these reforms will come in for investment just as much as what we've seen in the earlier years when India opened to the reforms, the industrial reforms.
Mr. Jayapanda, the last time your government tried to push through, now all of industry we've spoken to so far welcoming your ideas or your suggestions, but the last time you came under pressure, you weren't in the BJP at that time, so not you personally, but the party that you're with came under pressure. They diluted what was being done originally on land acquisition. There will be a political blowback. The Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh is upset. We know that the opposition will make this an issue. You will be accused of being heartless. And therefore, what's the guarantee that you will stand up and push back and not repeat what happened earlier?
So, this relates to something you asked a little bit earlier also as to whether this is the right time to do labour reforms. The reality is that labour reforms are overdue by many decades. All the panelists on this show, ladies and gentlemen, will agree with this, because India has incentivized the use of automation, where in fact everywhere else in the world people use labor, human labor, and that is this is the kind of inverted incentivization system we have built in our regulatory environment. So the blunt answer to your question is there will never be a perfect time to do labor reform. It should have been done many decades ago, but this crisis is the perfect opportunity, because all these large numbers of lakhs, tens of lakhs of units that are closed or only partially operating need to get back up to speed as quickly as possible. And anybody who's been in the business of creating jobs, hiring people in India in the private sector will tell you that they used to be scared of hiring people because of the hassles involved with all the red tape. Now, because of the relaxations which have been tried out in several states, the existing plants should have no difficulty in getting their payroll back up quickly without that fear of dealing with red tape. Now, your question about whether investment will come in unless these are longer lasting is a more valid question. I think we'll have to see the results of these changes kick in, and they should kick in within the next 2 to 3 years.
No, but it doesn't really work like that. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, the Yogi Adityanath government has said that the labor reforms are for 3 years. Now, you're saying we want to move manufacturing out of China, but any company, even if they seriously consider coming to India, Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee will expect continuity. Enforcement of contract is one of the biggest problems of doing business in India. Now, you say come, invest, and 3 years later, God alone knows whether that law will be there, flexible labor laws will be there, or will we be back to what's the current situation?
Hear me, Rahul.
Sir?
I made a point that the three-year timeline will help existing units in India to get going. And beyond the 3 years, to attract investment, we will have to show that these labor changes are kicking in within 3 years.
How important, Mr. Banerjee, are land and labor reforms at this moment? I mean, ordinarily, how important are they? Super important. At this moment, given the magnitude of the crises that we are dealing with, how important are these, sir?
So, at this point in time, it is also super important, because it is now that you need to kickstart the economy domestically. You need to see that people are facilitated when you are really looking at ease of doing business in India. And there is a huge opportunity which the Prime Minister talked about yesterday, and we know about the huge opportunity which is there India's way. When capital is looking for a place, and India stands very high, and if there are certain reforms, land, labor reforms are one, competitiveness by lowering our logistics cost of capital, whole lot of things actually which can be done, and I think all of this can be done effectively. One point which is very, very going to be very important as we go along is going to be that much of these reforms, as you will see, are in the states of India. And it is these states of India which is going to draw foreign capital. And yes, of course, 3 years is a time frame. But yes, foreign capital will definitely, foreign and domestic capital, would really look at continuity and a permanency in a change, in the change of.
No, but remember, central to
laws,
this idea of pulling manufacturing away from China is the hope that companies want to leave China. There's an article that came in Fortune magazine which quotes the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, which says that 70% of the American companies they spoke to in China said they had no intentions of leaving. And if you think of what's happened post this pandemic, it's China that's got its manufacturing up and running far faster than Europe, the United States and India. Therefore, the message could potentially be, Jay Panda, that, you know, you're safer, your manufacturing lines are safer if you're producing in China rather than moving out. So how are we so certain that companies are desperate? President Trump is asking for it, Prime Minister Modi is asking for it, but we don't know at this moment whether companies are actually itching to get out of China like we're hoping, and that we can bring them to India.
Rahul, the simple answer to this question is, currently it may look like it is safer to manufacture in China, but the bigger question is, can they export from China and where will the market do? Because the globalization that the world had seen in the decades after World War II has started changing in the last few years. And we were on the wrong side of the curve when the world was opening up. And we should not be on the wrong side of the curve when the world is developing much more self-reliance. Everybody is doing it. America is doing it. Other countries are doing it. And China itself doesn't allow our pharmaceuticals, for instance, into China. So the reality is, it's not just that manufacturing in China has to make sense. It has to make sense that they can access markets everywhere else. And to access the Indian market, the boost that has been given to local manufacturing today by these policy changes are going to matter quite a lot.
Okay. Sanjay Kapoor, your sense on whether land labour reform at this moment will have the multiplier effect the government would hope? Would it change the mind of, you know, industrialists such as yourself to want to increase their investments in India, or do you think the challenge right now is just survival? You can make it easier to survive, but we're not really looking to grow. We'd rather just live through this crisis first.
Well, I think the Prime Minister said something very appropriate in terms of creating local demand and creating companies or make in India sort of companies for the world, for the global manufacturing world. We are sitting in a great position, especially in the automotive component industry, to create a manufacturing hub in India. You know, any kind of labor land reform will give a great boost and a great confidence for companies to come into India. I think one of the great things is ease of doing business. One of the things that companies look for to come into any country, if you've seen companies go to Vietnam, Mexico, Thailand, it's been the ease of doing business. I think once the ease of doing business is relaxed, is more conducive, more companies will set up manufacturing. I think we need to plan for the future.
Ease of doing business, Make in India is virtually the same thought as Atmanirbhar Bharat. What's changed? The government's been talking about all of this for 6 years. Many of it has been spoken of but not implemented fully, even though attempts have been made. What do you think is different this time? Are you getting a sense that there's something different? What is it different this time?
I think there is one thing which is very, very important. I think now
where we cannot delay this any further, number one, which is quite clear. It's clear in the political system. It is clear very much in the bureaucratic system. It's obviously understood and appreciated and demanded for by the industry. The second part is, like you have started states talking about it. Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh started talking about it and taking that step to yes, we will. So I think there are
going forward from the central level to the state level, where states also seeing an advantage of making this happen. Is these two are very big signals, and I think that's the reason why I'm hopeful now that this crisis itself can and if we want to find a solution to this crisis, this is a very, very important and a necessary condition for us to get out of it.
Venu Srinivasan, the sanctimony of contracts, that there is a contract which a government has signed with a domestic company or an international company, that is honoured, is one of the biggest reasons why international business is distrustful of India. They've burned their fingers too many times over. What do you think can be done? Because a lot of it is judicial, some of it is legislative, but what can be done to ensure that while we address the issue of land and labour, we also look at the sanctity of contracts?
I think Prime Minister did mention liquidity, labor, land and laws. The entire judicial system is clogged. I think fortunately due to arbitration, some of it has definitely been solved. Many recent cases have gone to arbitration even against the government or between private parties to Singapore or London and been solved quickly. But retrospective legislation is certainly an issue with international confidence. So we should make a public declaration that we will not do retrospective legislation. We will also set up business courts where condonment of delays will not be allowed, where adjournments will not be given at a drop of a hat, and time-bound judgments must come. If this is not done, you cannot climb the ladder of ease of doing business and come to international standards.
TV Narendran, how do you think we should approach the idea of enforcing the validity of a contract? Because see what happened in Andhra Pradesh, the government changed, Jagan Reddy came in, he didn't care about what Chandrababu Naidu had done with the Singapore investors. The Singapore investors ended up burning their fingers and promising never to come back. How do we ensure, when we're dealing with, why I'm focusing on this is, while we're dealing with other problems, can we find a way of resolving this as well?
Right. It is certainly a big problem, and this has come back to us in multiple interactions with foreign investors. They say we can live with a higher cost of doing business, but we need, comfort that the contracts will be honored. Because once you commit an investment, they don't want the policies to change. So this is an issue. I think as a country, we are recognizing the criticality of this problem, and we are realizing that this is what is making people reluctant to come and invest in India. I hope we learn by example. I hope at the national level and at the state level, we honor the contracts, because otherwise our credibility goes as an investment destination. So it's a very important part of the journey which I think we should commit.
Jai Panda, what more should we expect in the second, third and the fourth tranche? Give us you work closely with the economic minds of the government. What should we expect in show number 2, 3 and 4?
Look, I think enough hints have been given by both the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. Not just the economy, but the other pillars are going to be the infrastructure, technology-driven systems changes. The Prime Minister emphasized that we cannot continue to operate on 20th century systems, and demography and demand. So you'll see lots happening on that. But I want to compliment you, Rahul, for reiterating the enforcement of contracts issue, because that is something that we need to work on. Although we made stunning improvements on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, the one thing that is holding us back is enforcement of contracts, and that's almost entirely within the judiciary. There are a lot of things that can be tried. The late Arun Jaitley, as law minister at the beginning of this century, had started fast-track courts who were giving lots of much faster results than the normal courts. But many states stopped funding them after the first initial funding was over. So we need to champion such measures, such as fast-track courts and such as reforms in the judicial system, so that
there'll be those who'll ask whether this is the right time to push through land and labor reform. To them I say, there is never a good time, there's never a right time. If the ship is coasting along just smoothly, there'll never be political appetite. In India, we tend to push through big reform only when there's a sense that the ship is sinking. And therefore, even if the benefit is not visible immediately, pushing through structural reform can possibly create conditions which can propel India's growth as we bounce back from this pandemic. What's been announced so far is promising. We look forward to seeing what other announcements are made by the government in part 2, 3 and 4. For the time being, Venu Srinivasan, TV Narendran, Shrikant Somani, Jai Panda, Chandrajit Banerjee and Sanjay Kapoor for joining us on this big India Today virtual brainstorm on ways of fighting the economic virus. We're dealing with a health crisis. We're focusing on that relentlessly here on India Today. We're also figuring out how to ventilate the Indian economy and bring the economy out of ICU and the life support that it's on currently. We'll keep tracking this. Thank you for tuning in to the Newstrack tonight. Rajdeep Sardesai is up next with the news today. Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kanwal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.